My name is Brian Cremin and I'm a Director of Overcare, but for today I'm going to chair today's patient day. But I suppose officially on behalf of all of us in Overcare, we're delighted to have you here, and we extend a very warm welcome to all of you to what's now our 9th patient day. And that's, I suppose from our perspective, that's a bit of a milestone when we set out on the journey of having these patient days at the start. When you're starting off on a journey, you want to know, is this going to be something that people will want to have and so on, and the fact that we're at our 9th one proves that there's a demand for them. As I said, our patient days are now very well established at this stage across Ireland as one of our feature events in the range of supports that we provide to our community of patients and their families and so on. Just some housekeeping. Exits are here, and there are fire exits right behind us here as well, or behind you. The facilities, the loos, are just outside here in the corridor, which I'm sure you saw on the way in, but nevertheless, good to point them out. Mobile phones, if we could, put them on silent or turn them off. As I say, lunch will be at 12:30. You'll all have gotten your welcome pack when you came in, so for those of you that haven't already done so, there's a white label inside there. If you could just write your name on it and stick it on yourself. It's very good in terms of breaking down those formal barriers when we go to chat to each other during the breaks and so on. Today's programme is designed to cover the physical, emotional and lifestyle effects of ovarian cancer. And while we want to give you as much information as possible, we also want to give you the opportunity to ask your questions. And this is a great opportunity for you to ask questions you might not normally get the opportunity to ask. If you're comfortable to ask the questions from the floor, please do. And we have 2 dedicated Q&A sessions, and I'll cover that in a second. If, like myself, you'd be inclined more to kind of have your question read out by somebody else, over here we have the question box and so on, and plenty of paper and pens. So write your questions out there. We'll collect those and we'll ask those questions on your behalf and get them answered by our panel. Also during lunchtime, that's a great opportunity when we're mingling. If there's any question you want to ask anybody in particular, just pull any of us to one side and we'll have a chat with you and we'll talk through it with you. Most of you will know, but for those of you that this may be your first patient day, Overcare was founded in 2011, and our mission is to improve the diagnosis and education of ovarian cancer within Ireland through sharing global research and best practice, and also by providing advocacy and support through our dedicated support network. And as is now our custom, we always start our patient days with a patient story, and today we've got Deirdre Kelly. Deirdre she's going to have the walk of shame now up the hallway from the bottom there, right? So look, I'd ask you all to give Deirdre a very warm welcome. So Deirdre Kelly. Stephen told you, walk of shame, Deirdre.
Yeah. Didn't realise that when I sat down the back. I was being the bold girl sitting down the back. Good morning, everybody. My name is Deirdre, and I'm from Mayo, and I'm come here today to give my story, which is a little bit dull, but anyway, I'll give it anyway, and then if anybody has any questions or anything. What I did was I did up some slides, and really they were more to keep me on track, because I have a tendency to waffle and ramble sometimes, so this is more about keeping me on track than anything else. So I'll start it. First of all, my name is Deirdre Kelly. I'm 45 now. I was 44 when I was diagnosed. I'm from Castlebar in County Mayo, and my centre of excellence is Galway region, or the University College Hospital in Galway, but I was lucky enough to be able to do my chemo in Mayo General, because they have a chemo unit in Mayo General, so I was lucky in that sense. My doctors were Dr. Michael O'Leary was my surgeon. He's based in Galway. Well, they're both based in Galway, but my medical oncologist, Dr. Paul Donnan, actually does a clinic in Castlebar every Wednesday, so in that sense he was in Castlebar and Galway, so that was they're the people that I had interaction with the most. So my story begins last May in 2015, and it was kind of a little bit of a fluke, and I think this is probably the biggest message, if you like, that I bring today. I had a chest infection, a bit of a cough, so I went to my GP with the cough. It's something I get 2 or 3 times a year. It's kind of a bit like, I think it's down to allergies and a little bit of asthma. So I was just in the GP as normal with this, and he prescribes a steroid and an antibiotic and go away, and it goes after a few days, and that's fine. But I had this niggly thing in my head that there was something else wrong, and there wasn't anything that was telling me, there wasn't any, I didn't have any, it's the usual story with OC, I didn't have any outstanding symptoms. I had some niggly things that were going on. I had a little bit of backache, and my stomach is a bit nervous anyway, so as it is today, it always reacts when I'm anxious. So I didn't put it down to anything other than that, but there was something in my head telling me that I should mention it to the GP. So as I said, it was vague symptoms, tummy upset, bit of achy back, and there was a bit of an expanding waistline, but to be honest, I was just putting that down to eating too much, because I was eating too much. So I was just putting that down to eating too much. So everything I was, explaining away, and I work in the civil service, which for a lot of you would instantly say, even including my own family, sure, you don't have a stressful job, but I actually do have a stressful job, and I was putting it all down to that. But there was something in my head that was telling me there was something wrong. So the GP jumped me up on the bed in his surgery, and he did a physical exam, and instantly, like literally within seconds, he said, you have an abdominal mass. So I said, oh right, do I? And the next thing, he had a letter referring me to Mayo General. That was my appointment was at 9 o'clock, because I always get early appointments so that I can go to work pretty quickly, straight over to work. But instead of going straight over to work, it was straight over to the hospital. So I was in Mayo General for the day. They did blood tests, all that kind of stuff. Next thing, I had an ultrasound, and then I had, a couple of weeks later, I had a CT, and then a couple of weeks later, I had an MRI. And by the time all of those were finished, my GP had referred me to Dr. O'Leary in Galway. So I never actually saw a gynaecologist in Castlebar, because my appointment for Galway had already come through by the time all of the tests were done. So as I said, the GP referred me to Dr. O'Leary. So that first appointment I had with a medical professional was with Dr. O'Leary in Galway. He told me that on the basis of all of the test results, that I had a complex cyst with suspicious cells around the edge. Now, he did explain that in more detail, but that's basically what my diagnosis was. My CA125, I'm sure all of you know what that is, was 26. So it was never outside of normal. It never raised above the 35. So, but that's what it was when I was diagnosed. So then, basically, his suggestion was to remove the cyst. And he was erring, the multidisciplinary team were erring on the side of conservative reaction, so they just decided to remove the cyst and see what came out of that before they did anything else. Now he's a specialist, Dr. O'Leary's a specialist in laparoscopic surgery, so I had that cyst removed in August, laparoscopically. It was 16 centimetres, so it was big enough. So I was surprised that he was able to do it laparoscopically, but I was also delighted that he was able to do it laparoscopically. So anyway, the results of that was that the cells were malignant, and they were high grade, the cells that were identified in the cyst. As a result of that, then I had to go back in for more surgery with everything else is removed. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, because I just simply can't. I've tried numerous times, so I'm not going to bother. But that's exactly what the second surgery did. Again, it was done laparoscopically, so but for both surgeries, I was lucky enough to have quite a quick recovery time. So it was really good. The histology from the second surgery, they did histology on all of the tissue they took out, and they did abdominal washings as well, and that was all negative. So that resulted in this diagnosis, a stage 1 high-grade adenocarcinoma, I got that one, of the ovary. And because it was high-grade, they recommended chemotherapy. So I got that surgery on the 19th of November. The results came through 2 weeks later, and a week later I started the chemotherapy, just before Christmas of December 2015. So what I did with this presentation was I broke it down into 2 sections, the diagnostic process and then the chemotherapy. And what I've done here is what did I learn from the process. So what did I learn from the diagnostic process? Everyone needs a good GP, and if you haven't got a good GP or you're not happy with your GP, change them, because in my experience, it's critical to have a good GP, a GP who looks outside the box and doesn't really, has the wherewithal to see that there could be something other than just a tummy's upset or whatever. My GP is brilliant. So, I actually travel 40 minutes to my GP because I used to live in Tubbercurry, and he's there, but he's so good that I just stuck with him. So I'm not going to leave, because he's really, really good. Tell your GP everything, and don't be afraid to tell them. Because if I hadn't said anything, I was leaving the office that day after he gave me the antibiotic for the chest infection, and it was only my own gut that said, say something, say something. It was actually in my head going, say something, say something, say something. So I was nearly out the door before I said anything. But I just said, I might as well say it, sure, it might be nothing, it might be something. Turned out it was something in the end. Don't ignore it. That's another thing. Don't ignore your instinct. I learned that all the way through this process. Don't ignore your instinct. Your gut is more often than not right. Try to remain positive. As I said, easier said than done, but critical, I think, to the recovery process. Really, really critical. Don't be afraid to cry. In fact, let it flow readily at any time and in any place, and I did at work and everything. So it's therapeutic. Talk to someone, let people help, let people in. I just said there that your friends and family already feel helpless, so it makes them feel better if you let them in. Do your research if it's what you need to do, which is something that I did need to do, but try not to rely too heavily on the internet, as it can sometimes bring you to places that you don't want to go. But at the same time, I'm a person who likes to have lots of information, so I did like to do my research, but there was a point where I kind of stopped, and sometimes it's just better to know where to stop, when to stop. So this is a picture I found online, and I thought it symbolised us all, I think, really. Not just me, but everybody. So this is the next section of the presentation is about chemotherapy. So I started that in December 2015, and I was, as I said, I was lucky in a sense because I was able to have my chemotherapy at home in Castlebar, so I didn't have any travelling to do, and I really appreciate the fact that happened, because I know there are lots of people who have to travel great distances to do their chemo, so I'm very lucky in that sense. And it's a fantastic unit in Castlebar. They're really, really good, and you know, you can talk to them about anything, and it wasn't an, obviously I didn't want to be there, didn't want to have chemo, but it wasn't an unpleasant experience when I was there. So I had 6 cycles of carboplatin and paclitaxel, again, words that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. And I had the Neulasta injection on day 2 every time as well. I'm not sure. I think it's pretty standard in Ireland, but I know from the Health Unlocked message board that it's not so standard in the UK. I don't know if they get it on a regular basis. So I commenced my chemo in December 2015, and I finished 3 weeks ago. So I finished on the 30th of March. I had an allergic reaction to the Taxol on the first infusion, which was extremely scary. It was just awful. But as I said, the chemo unit in Castlebar is brilliant because I have an allergy to ibuprofen. So I told that to the nurse, and she told me afterwards she thought maybe I might have an allergic reaction. So she had the stuff ready beside me. And next thing I knew, there was 3 nurses and they had everything sorted. So I felt very safe. They took the infusion away and then they left it for half an hour and reintroduced it, and I was fine after that, and I didn't have any other reactions. So I was lucky in that sense as well. The side effects, again, these are not new to any of you guys. Hair loss, fatigue, bone pain from the Neulasta. Now I was lucky it wasn't too bad. It was there, but it wasn't too bad. I had the one thing that I had awful problems with was my digestive system, where it was really wasn't good at all. I had to manage that really, really well. I had to constantly think about how I was going to manage it, drinking loads more water, pears, kiwis, all of that kind of stuff. Chemo brain, yes, I did have chemo brain, and I still have chemo brain. I had minor loss of appetite. That's something I didn't find. In actual fact, it was the other way around. I found myself eating like there was no tomorrow. So what did I learn from chemotherapy? And the first thing I learned is that it's crap, but it's doable. There's no two ways about it. It is crap, but it is doable, and I've gotten through it. So I'm out the other side now. Talk to the chemo nurses. They're really, really helpful. And one thing that I found, I was having, as I said, awful time with my digestive system. And I said it to one of the nurses, and they changed my anti-sickness meds from the Zofran to Amend. And it made a huge difference. So I still had to manage it, and I still had to mind what I was doing and be mindful of what I was doing. But it made a huge difference, for me anyway. So I had that then from then on, and drink loads of water. And I was drinking 3 to 4 litres of water a day, and I found it very hard to to get that amount of water into me. But it did make a huge difference, because the days that I didn't get that much into me, I knew that I hadn't gotten it into me. So it makes a difference. One of the things, which was the funny one really, as I said, my job is quite stressful. It can be quite stressful, not all the time, but I'm on the go a lot. So when I was in infusion day, you had to sit down, you had to stay in the seat for the day, and you were in the one room for the day. So I found that not that I was looking forward to it, but I didn't dread it, because it meant that I had a day of rest, even though there was a needle in my arm while I was resting, but it was a day of rest. So I didn't dread it. I didn't look forward to it, but I didn't dread it. The message board, the Health Unlocked, and I know there's a few people in the room that are engaged with that board. I engaged with it a lot throughout the whole process, and I found it absolutely brilliant. And I still find it absolutely brilliant. I'm on it once or twice a day, so if anybody hasn't engaged with it so far, it's really, really, and you can be as anonymous as you want, or you can be fully open, and it's really, really good. So I would absolutely recommend anybody who hasn't had a go at it to have a go at it. The other thing, talk to people in the ward, in the chemo ward. I found that chatting with people that are having the same, or they might be different regimens, but they're going through the same process, that I found that very good as well. And they know what you're going through, so they have a sense of what you're at. And oncology nurses are some of the best people on the planet, definitely. I found that anyway. So what now? I have to go. About 9 months before I was diagnosed, my sister was diagnosed with breast cancer. So she had just about finished her chemo when I got my diagnosis. So because we were both in our early 40s, both of our oncologists have put us forward for genetic testing. So I'm just waiting now to get called for the genetic testing. So my sister, on the other hand, is not waiting for the results of the genetic testing. She's decided that she's going to have her ovaries removed. So that's her decision. I'll wait for the results of the genetic testing before I decide what happens, but I'll wait and see what happens, but we've been put forward for it anyway. I'm going back to work. I worked throughout chemo. I worked about half to 60% of the time, because I found really, for me, it was about my mental health, and that really was part of keeping my mind where it needed to be. So my work have been very supportive, so I'm very lucky in that sense. But so I've taken the last 3 weeks, and I'm off next week as well, so I go back then the following week. I work in the government department, so it's kind of quiet at the moment because we don't have government. I probably shouldn't say that. No, there's plenty to be doing, but there's no impetus, or there's no very pushy individual at the head of at the helm. I work in the Department of the Environment. So for those of you who know who was at the helm of the Department of the Environment, I will say no more. My next thing then is a healthy eating plan. Now I'm not the most unhealthy eater, but I wouldn't be the most healthy eater either. So I need to start, getting a bit on top of that, and also the fitness and toning up. That's another thing I'm going to start getting into. The other thing is that I don't want the diagnosis to define my future. So as soon as I'm ready to, I'm a bit knackered at the moment, but as soon as I'm ready to, I'm going to move on, if you like, and pretend that it didn't happen. Not that I pretend that it didn't happen, but try and get it out of my head so that it doesn't define my future. And then live my life to the fullest every day. That is actually something that this has taught me, is not to take anything for granted. So that's it.